Thank you, Ashton. With us we have Jaromir Stoll. He is with Great Bear Comics, or I guess I'm going to say the creator and founder, originator of Great Bear Comics. Yep. I stopped at your booth. You're with Samuel Tier, who you probably just heard in the episode, talking about his book, but you're at his booth. Yep. And I stopped because you drew a fantastic picture of the modern day Maharaja, Jinder Mahal. Tell us what inspired you to draw Jinder.
A good friend of mine is really into wrestling, Zach Kinsella. He's been getting me into it slowly by kind of getting me to be a fan of specific people. One of the first was Joey Ryan, who I also have a fan piece by because of his dong style stuff, which cracked me up. And I'm basically an ecofeminist, so seeing like the kind of mockery of patriarchy was also like, yes, this is good. And so he was telling me about Jinder Mahal winning the championship title, and I was just like, oh shit, that's great, because it's Sikh representation, it's Indian representation. And then seeing some of his performances where it's like he's talking about how people hate him because he's brown, it's like, yes, we need to talk about this, especially with Donald Trump and immigration reform issues. It's just like, this is important political theater as performative entertainment theater.
So it's funny, I hear a lot of people like, oh, I hate his run, just because they're in that like wrestling fan mode. I was like, you guys don't understand. Like, the genius of this is that he's not just the bad guy. He's not the Iron Sheik. I'm going to blow you up. I hate you. He's this mirror that's saying the only reason you boo me is because I'm brown. Yeah. And like, that's amazing. It's genius. And then he says, I'm going to speak to my people, and starts speaking in Punjabi, which I'm not even sure that's what he's speaking because I don't know a bunch of languages. But it's this fascinating like glimpse into wrestling fandom, and this fascinating glimpse into how to intentionally write a character that isn't bad. He's just pointing out to you that you don't like him for all the wrong reasons. Like, it's just such a genius move. So obviously, you don't just do wrestling fan art. Yeah. When you're not doing wrestling fan art, how does working within those same kind of themes inform your art?
A lot of my comics are about sort of the ineffable in life, coming out of kind of looking more so at everyday life as incredibly meaningful and powerful, because I'm also a folklorist. I have a PhD in folklore. I teach the social sciences. So all my comics are kind of informed by critical engagement with these concepts, values, or ideologies and assumptions that we have. And so my comics are kind of informed by that. Like I did a reading last night of a comic I did where this guy meets a bear in the forest, but realizes that media consumption isn't the be-all, end-all. Life is the be-all, end-all. So he kind of reframes his enjoyment of media in a different way, where it's like, okay, this is good and all, but what's really important is bonding with my dog, with my family, with my friends, and maintaining those relationships over consumerism. My autobiographical comic, which I just finished, is on a kind of similar theme of like, what really matters, what is identity, what is the self, but just being like, oh, the self is the work of creating a self, just living and being alive. Kind of making people think less about comics as consumerism and more about comics as like, this is a way I can reframe my own understanding of my world.
As somebody that has a PhD in folklore, how do you feel comic books, like, you know, in the industry, like the big two, Marvel, DC, how do you feel those kind of fit into what the future of folklore is going to look like?
That's a really tough question, because folklore is such a cohesive whole that comics are clearly part of that to me. So I'm a folklore studies scholar, but a lot of folkloristics in the past would have said comics aren't folklore because they're mass produced. Well, then what about indie comics? What about self-publications? What about zines? And so that gets complicated really quickly. I would say they're already part of folklore. They're already part of what we have, because we have folklore now that's mashups. It's fusing together all this stuff. But in the past, that would have just been called creativity. That would have just been storytelling. Mashups, that's just normal. That's just life. Like, every day of our lives is a mashup of everything we've ever done in our entire lives. So I think it's more that folklore informs comics because they're part of folklore.
So when we first came up here, we were talking about how we're both very tired. Like, you know, it's day 2, you know, I put in like a 14, 15-hour day yesterday doing this, running around. Even when I have to drive to Greeley, it's an hour and a half north of here. I had to like sit down and write a wrap-up article before I went to bed. So I got to bed at 2, woke up at 6. Yeah. You know, it's exhausting. But you mentioned that you also have social anxiety. My wife suffers from social anxiety. Like, how do you keep your shit together in this?
It's tough. So I technically have a mild anxiety disorder, but that was diagnosed about 10 years ago when I had full health care, which I don't really have now. I will soon, because I just got a new job.
Maybe.
That's true, if the world completely...
Thanks, Obama. I mean, wait, no, wrong one.
Right, that horrible creature in office. But yeah, so basically I cope by focusing on specific things to accomplish each day. I don't make myself be out on the show floor for very long. It's like, okay, I will go talk to 3 people, come back, and I will draw for 10 minutes. Because when I draw, my other senses kind of dull, and I can just focus on being in that moment and allowing it to kind of encapsulate me. I also have some Xanax in my bag, just in case. And I had a bit of a freak out. I was at Emerald City Con earlier this year, and I had a kind of a freak out moment, and I had to take some Xanax. There were just too many people, and when these people are like walking by and looking at you, oof, boy, does that build up real fast. Where it's just like, go away.
So it's interesting. I tend to be a fairly okay person with that until people are physically touching me, and then I freak out. Like I hate being in crowds where like I'm actually being touched. But it's interesting because we have science, we have medicine that can help like curb those emotions, curb that that intense thing. But there still seems to be like a stigma on it. Like anything that is considered a quote unquote mental health issue can be stigmatized. Is there a way that you feel you kind of try to speak towards unstigmatizing that by being honest about it?
A little bit, yeah. There's definitely some really great comics anthologies out there. I'm totally spacing on the name of one that a bunch of people I know have been associated with. Sweaty Palms Anthology, that's what it's called. They just put out 1 volume. They're doing a call right now for the 2nd volume. I'm going to probably submit a story if I can get my shit together for it, because it is all about anxiety and mental health and dealing with that. But yeah, it's also just that I'm super direct, because I grew up in the middle of nowhere in Michigan. Everyone in my family... we're just direct as fuck. We'll just be like, you are bothering me right now. Please be quiet. Or my arguments with my sister usually come down to one of us saying, okay, I need you to go away for 10 minutes, and then we can come back, and it'll be great. But I need to get coffee, too, after that, and then food, because I'm hangry. We have a lot of directness just within how we communicate together, and I think that that's probably an unconscious way that I engage with it. Sam was telling me earlier that he looks at my comics and he thinks it's remarkable that I talk directly about uncomfortable things like death, mental health, like illness, or like my autobiographical comic has part of it's about how my dad was really sick. He was given 4 months to live, and then they realized he wasn't sleeping at all. But at the time, we just thought he was going away, like he was dying. He has severe health problems from a bone marrow transplant that was basically a way to resolve lymphoma. I was living with them for a couple months, trying to help out while this was all happening, and he was hallucinating all the time. It's so disturbing to be around someone you love and to not be able to talk to them because they're like, oh, did you get that spaceship? It's like, I want to know about your hallucination, but I'd also like to have a very real conversation with you where you're not like, oh yeah, there's a puppy on your head. Like, that didn't really happen, but you know, that kind of stuff now, it's just like, I talk about it and people are maybe discomfited. But I also kind of, because of my family, don't really notice as much, maybe.
I find it refreshing. Like, I find it refreshing that you're willing to be very honest. Like, I'm a complete stranger. Like, the only reason I talk to you is because I like Jinder Mahal. So my son Ashton had a question for you.
At the beginning, you said you were a professor. I'm not sure if you've already said something about it, but what do you do?
So right now I'm an affiliate faculty still at Metropolitan State University, and I teach cultural anthropology there. Right now I'm in the midst of teaching a cross-cultural communication course, but I just was hired. I basically offered a position and take it at Columbus College of Art and Design in Columbus, Ohio. So I'm going to be moving there in August, which is terrifying because moving always sucks.
It doesn't matter if you have social anxiety or not, moving sucks.
Yeah. There, I'm going to be teaching social science. I'm going to be the chair of the Department of Science and Social Science. It's a one-person department right now, except for there's part-time faculty who I'll then be kind of coordinating. Looking forward to that. It's going to be exciting and stressful and exciting. But I'm also going to be hopefully teaching within the comics program there, which is just starting this fall. The Department of Comics, which is going to be fucking just badass. They got Emmy Guinness, who's a great comics creator. Just hired her on, and she's going to be teaching some of the classes there. They also have some people there already who are really badass, like Lauren McCubbin, Robert Loss. So it'll be, hopefully, I'm pretty sure I'm going to be teaching in there, but they're still kind of working out the details of all this because I was just hired.
Right.
So yeah, that should be pretty fun, teaching on comics culture and history and also how to create comics. And if anyone's interested in getting a bachelor's in comics, that's a great place to do it.
How can people find your work and then maybe touch base with you about getting that bachelor's degree in comics and just, basically make contact with you and find out more about your stuff?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter as Great Bear Comics or Jaromir Stoll. Jaromir is kind of my comics producing persona. It's a nickname that I got from a former professor of mine who was just a badass. In any case, you can also find me at greatbearcomics.wordpress.com. And yeah, if you look for Great Bear Comics on Instagram, I'm on there, but I haven't updated them forever because I don't actually have a smartphone yet. I had an Android emulator and it stopped working, and yeah. I think I'm on all kinds of social media. I just forget.
That's okay. So do I. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. We really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks so much for talking with me.